Okay. Okay. So hello guys to this opening Zoom for the second module about media education and a critical understanding of media. Today we have with us back again Dr. Samy Tayie. He is the chief of the Arab chapter of the UNESCO Media and Information Literacy Alliance, and he's a professor at the Faculty of Communication at Cairo University in Egypt. He's author of several articles and materials on interculturality, media literacy, and education and communication. And he holds a PhD from the Autonomous University of Barcelona with the thesis News Literacy for a Responsible Online News Experience Against Harmful Messages. So he is hosting today's Zoom. And back in a little bit later in this same mode, we will be having daughter that will be closing this model. So welcome, Sammy,
Thank
and
you. Thank you, Albert.
you
Thank you.
have the
Thank you. I believe that we have only Jamal, who's a newcomer, but the rest of them, they were here last time.
yes,
Is
exactly,
correct?
yes, yeah, correct.
Okay, for the sake of Jamal, I'm going to briefly summarize what I mentioned last time, and it's always a pleasure to be with you. I'm happy to be with you for the second time. And for the sake of Jamal and any other newcomer, I'm going to, go quickly over what I just said last time. We are in the business of communication. And when we talk about communication, as we indicated before, communication or human communication is a very important characteristic of all human beings. We are communicating with each other. So communication is something very basic and very important for every and each one of us. And when we talk, of course, what we said about communication, we said that communication is usually can be divided into two important types. We have what we call the verbal or the linguistic communication. And on the other hand, we have what we call non-verbal or non-linguistic communication. And what do we mean by verbal communication? It is the communication which relies mainly on the use of language, whether it is a spoken language, a written language, audiovisual language, etc. And then the other type is what we call non-verbal or non-linguistic communication. And this is the communication which relies mainly on the movement of body or facial expressions. And that's what we may call body language. I mean, you move your body and you move your hands and this and that. And accordingly, you are communicating or transferring certain feelings or certain messages. And then after that, I think we talk about different levels of communication and we distinguish when we talk about human communication, whether it is verbal or non-verbal, we can easily distinguish six important levels of communication, which are intrapersonal communication, interpersonal communication, intragroup communication, intergroup communication, organizational communication, and finally mass communication. The first one or the first level of communication is what we call intra-group communication. And what do we mean by intra-group communication? Sorry, intrapersonal communication. It is a communication between the man and himself. When a man communicates with himself, that's what we call intrapersonal communication. When, for example, when I talk to you now and you try to understand what I'm saying, or while you are sitting, you are thinking about something different. You are thinking or dreaming or whatever. All these psychological processes which occur inside the human brain, we may call them intrapersonal communication. Briefly, it is the communication between the man and himself. The second level of communication, as we indicated, is what we call interpersonal communication. And here, it is a communication between two persons. And sometimes we call this level of communication face-to-face communication because it relies mainly on the face. We can see each other's face. Two persons, they can see each other's faces while communicating. And that's why we call it interpersonal communication or face-to-face communication. And sometimes, when you chat with somebody, when you chat on your mobile, when you speak on the phone to another person, it's also could be considered as a kind of interpersonal communication because that's what we may call machine assisted interpersonal communication. The third level of communication is what we call the intra-group communication, and it is a communication between, among members of one group. And as you know, when we say a group, it means three persons or more. A group is a group of people, some individuals who share or who have a lot of things in common. For example, I can call you a group because you have some common objectives, you share a lot of things in common, etc. So when you communicate with each other, that's what we call intra-group communication. The fourth level is what we call inter-group communication, and that's a communication between two or three groups. For example, sometimes we organize in the university a competition between a group of students from the faculty of whatever law and another group from the faculty of medicine. So when we organize this kind of competition, we may call it inter-group communication. This is a communication between two groups or three groups. Then fifthly, level number five is what we call organizational or institutional communication. And of course, it is a communication which occurs inside the institute or inside the organization. That's why we call it institutional or organizational communication. And this level of communication, it may take one of two forms. It could be vertical communication from top to bottom and the bottom to top. And thus it takes the form of instructions or orders coming from the president or the rector to employees. Or the employees, they may suggest or give comments or write reports to the president of the company. That's why it's a kind of two-way communication from top to bottom and the bottom to top. That's what we call vertical communication. And then we have another form of horizontal communication. It is what we call the horizontal communication. It is a communication between two staffers, two employees, and they are at the same level. That's what we call horizontal communication. And finally, we ended by talking about mass communication. And when we talk about mass communication, of course, we talk about a dynamic process. A dynamic process which include four important elements: the communicator, the source, or the sender, and then the message, the channel or the medium, and finally the audience or the receivers. And as when we say communicator or source, it is a person who has some information, and he usually encode or put this information in a form of a message, whether it is an article, a news story, TV program, a radio program, and then he uses one of the one medium or one channel to transfer this message or this information to the audience. That's why we call it dynamic process. Why? Because usually he expects to receive some kind of feedback from the audience to tell him whether his message was correct or this or that. I think that's mainly what we talked about last time. Did we mention anything else? No? No. Okay. Today I'm going to talk to you about something different. I'm going to talk to you about media. As Jamal just mentioned, we need to understand a little bit about media. When we talk about media, we talk about mainly a channel or a tool which we use in order to communicate with others. But the other here is not one or two persons, it's a huge number of people. And that's why we call it, we rely on what we call the, communication technology. And this communication technology can be radio, a TV, digital media, etc. Briefly, we can divide the media into two important categories. The first category is what we call the traditional media, right? And the second one is what we call the non-traditional media. When we talk about traditional media, we really mean three important media. We mean print media, we mean radio and television. This is what we mean by traditional media. And on the other hand, we have what we call non-traditional or digital media, and these are the media which rely mainly on the use of digital technology. If we handle the first category, which is print media, radio, and TV, let me say a few words about every and each one of them. When we talk about print media, we talk about a wide range of media. You know, we talk about newspapers, talk about magazines, we talk about posters, we talk about leaflets, brochures, etc. All these are counted for as print media. But for the sake of our study here, when we talk about print media, we are mainly interested in newspapers and magazines. These are the most important two media when we talk about print media. As you all know, newspaper is a periodical, which is printed. 99% of newspapers are printed daily on a daily basis. And as you can see from the name, it is newspaper. It's a paper which is mainly concerned with the news, right? That's the definition, the very simple definition of the newspaper. It is mainly concerned with the news stories, right? And if we talk about, the history of these print media, the history can go back, to a very, very long history. Can go back to the old, uh, you know, the old civilization, the old or the ancient Egyptian civilization. Uh, in this civilization, they were using what we call a sculpture. I mean, they were writing on rocks and on walls. And at that point of time, we talk about 7,000 years ago or 5,000 years before Christ. Here they did not have any kind of language, but they were mainly relying on something called hieroglyphic language. And this hieroglyphic language takes the form of signs, pictures, etc. And they used to do this kind of sculpture on walls and on rocks. That was the first ever form of the print media. And then by the year 2500, the Egyptians, they discovered what we call the papyrus papers. And these are some kind of papers which are grown on the two sides of the Nile, of the river Nile, and they used to make out of these some kind of leaves, and they used to write on these leaves. And these 2,500, it marks the beginning of the first ever mobile technology. At the same time, in Central America, I don't know if we have anybody here from Latin America or Southern America, no? None.
I don't think so. No, no.
Okay, okay. So we have also in Central America or in Mexico, they use also to have some kind of ficus trees, and they have some kind of huge papers, and they used to write on this paper. So what I'd like to say here, the year 2500, whether according to the papyrus papers or to the ficus papers, it marks the beginning of the documentation of history, because during that time they start to write and make some kind of documentation about movement of the star, the harvest time, right? Uh, Whatever, rainfalls. So we can say that this marks the beginning of, documentation during the old days. Then we move a little bit more to the Chinese. After so the print media starts as a kind of a sculpture on walls and rocks. Then they start to write on papyrus and ficus papers. And then if we move to China, to the old Chinese civilization, thanks to Chinese, we came to know about the paper industry. Therefore, two important things, they were discovered or they were introduced by the old Chinese. The first one is what we call the paper industry. And the second one, the first ever written language. The Chinese language was the first ever written language. Chinese, they use a kind of language, and it was a kind of development for the old hieroglyphic language. Because if you see the old Chinese language, it's a kind of structures, and every structure has some kind of meaning. And then after that, the paper industry, it moves from China to the Arab Peninsula, and then to Egypt, North Africa, and then to Spain, where we are now. And as you know, the Arabs, they came to Spain and they stayed for longer. They stayed for about 8 centuries. Yeah, and they brought with them the paper industry and many other things. Then that was the initial stage of the print media. Then, if we look into the temporary history of the print media, it goes back to the 15th century. And during the 15th century, and precisely in the year 1439, Johann Gutenberg, a German guy, he discovered what we call now the printing technology, right? And ever since, with the introduction of the printing technology, we can say that it marks the very beginning of the temporary print media. When we talk about print media, as we know today, as I told you, we have only, we have quite a few media. The most important media are, the newspapers and the magazines. And as I mentioned to you, when you talk about the newspaper, you talk about a periodical, which is usually printed daily on a daily basis. And the newspaper is mainly concerned with news stories because we read newspaper for news. Of course, that was before the introduction of social media. Now things are changed a little bit. But usually when we talk about newspaper, we talk about a medium or a channel for news. And let me mention to you, when we talk about news, I think we can distinguish different types of news. Can you refresh our memories? Can you tell me what are the different types, different kinds of newspapers? For those of you who have some kind of experience in media, no? None? Jamal, are you with us?
I'm here. Uh,
No, try to think or try to do some kind of guess. Yet, what are
uh,
the different types of newspapers?
uh, you have tabloids.
Yes, thank you.
Uh, you have, I don't know, information like the news, normal news.
Mhm.
Um, can't think of any others.
Okay. Anybody else can say something? Hmm.
Maybe local papers versus national.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Let me, to make the long story short for you, when we talk about newspaper and different types of newspapers, we have four important criteria which we can consider while classifying the different types of newspapers. The first criterion is what we call the geographical coverage. The second one is what we call the ownership. The third one is what we call printing time. And the fourth one is related to what Jamal just mentioned, size of the newspaper. If we take the first criterion, talking about geographical coverage, we can easily distinguish uh, uh, four types of newspapers. Four types of newspaper may be considered according to the criterion of geographical coverage. Number one, we have what we call local newspapers, and these local newspapers are circulated within one part of the country. Then we have national newspapers, which are circulated all over the country. Then we have thirdly, what we call regional newspapers, and these regional newspapers are circulated within one region, one specific region, such as Europe, North America, Latin America, Middle East, Arab world, etc. So it is a newspaper which is circulated in one region. And finally, we have the global newspaper, which are circulated all over the world. If we turn to the second criterion, we can say that we have, according to the ownership, we have three types of newspapers. The first one is what we call the state-owned newspaper, which are owned by the state. Then we have private newspaper, which are owned by private firms or businessmen. And finally, we have what we call partial newspapers, and these are the newspapers which are owned by political parties. So we have four sorry, 3 types of newspapers according to ownership. Then if we move to the third criterion, printing time, we have either morning newspaper or evening newspapers, right? Then, according to the size of the newspaper, we have what we call the standard newspaper or normal size newspaper. And then on the other hand, we have what we call the tabloid newspaper. These are mainly what we can say about, about the, different types of newspapers. If we turn to magazine, how many types of magazine do we have? We can also distinguish probably 3 types of magazines. We have, number one, we have what we call general magazine, which covers a wide range of topics, economics, politics, military, etc., sports. And then we have what we call a specialized magazine. And these type of magazines are directed to a specific audience, such as, for example, sports magazines, women's magazine, children's magazines. And then we have also what we call professional magazine. And these are the magazines which are directed to people who belong to certain profession, such as medical doctors, engineers, pharmacists, etc. So every pharmacist, every profession must have some kind of magazine for them, which are usually produced by their syndicates. So these are if we look at the difference between the newspaper and magazine, we can easily say that they are different in size. They are different in the quality. Usually magazines have better quality of newspapers, better quality of printing, color separation, etc. And at the same time, they are more expensive. Magazines are more expensive than newspapers. That's what we can say briefly about the print media. Then if we move to the second media, which is radio. As you know, radio was introduced for the first time in 1920, and that was introduced in a city called Pittsburgh, in Pennsylvania state. And the first radio broadcasting was to announce the results of presidential elections. That was radio. Then television was introduced for the first time in 1936, and that was the British Broadcasting Corporation's TV. And then, it stopped again in 1939 because of the eruption of World War II, and then it resumed in 1946. And then from that time, it spread all over the world. That was about radio and TV. When we talk about radio and television, we can easily distinguish 2 systems. We call them 2 broadcasting systems. The first system is what we call the public service broadcasting. And the second one is what we call the commercial system of broadcasting, or commercial broadcasting system. The first one is what we call public service. And these type of system, it relies mainly, we can distinguish, between these 2 types according to the funding, according to the sources of funding. Public service system, according to the public service system, TV and radio are usually, funded by subscription. Every time you have to go to, buy a TV, you have to buy what we call the license, which allows you to use the service. So public service system, according to this public service system, the funding source is mainly subscription and licenses. The second one, or the second type, is what we call commercial broadcasting system. And from the name, we can say that the funding sources here are mainly advertisements. They are supported and funded by advertisements. And talking about, let me tell you some funny story which I experienced when I was in England. I was in England. I went there to do my PhD, and then I bought. Of course, people told me that okay, in order to improve your English, you have to buy a TV. You have to have a television so that your English will be improved. So I bought a second-hand TV for about 50 pounds, and it was color TV, nice. And took it home. I was very happy. And then one day, somebody knocked at the door and they're asking me, hello, and they introduce themselves. They show me a card or something, an ID that is from the British Broadcasting Corporation and something controller or something. And then I invite them inside. He asked me, do you have a TV? Yes, you have this and that. And then he told me, did you buy a license? I said to him, no, I didn't buy anything. Okay. He didn't say no word, just he went out. Then 2 weeks later, I was summoned by the court. They asked me to come to court and they want, of course, I was young and they didn't bother, I didn't go. I was still, young man and I didn't go. Then a bit of time later on, they sent me, some kind of fine to pay. I had to go and pay £400 as a fine because I use a television without having a license. Of course, I had to go there and then I said, I'm a student, I don't have money and this and that. And then they said, no way, you have to pay it. Then I said, I can pay by installments. They asked me, how much can you pay every week? I said, I can pay £1. And £1, during the 80s, it was some money, £1 pound. I had to go there every week, to pay £1 and they give me a receipt. And it's but in the end of the day, I think the university contacted them and they removed the fine from my, but that shows you that, compulsory and by law, if you have a TV and if you use the public service, you have to buy a license for it. I don't know what about the system in the States. It does work the same way, Maya and Jamal?
I
know.
don't think so.
I don't
I don't
believe so at all.
know. I mean, we have public like PBS, but that's yeah, they just ask for
It,
public funding through donations more than anything else.
yeah, it's not a
You don't have to buy a
subscription.
license?
No.
No.
No, lucky you. You don't. But the English people, they in England you have to take buy a license, And I remember at that time during the 80s, it was something like £90, 90, £30. But in the States, you have what we call the cable TV and these kind of things. You have to subscribe, right?
For cable TV, usually you pay through a provider,
Mhm.
and they will give you the package of channels. But a lot of that has changed now with streaming as well. So you may not even have a provider, but as long as you have Wi-Fi, some streaming channels are available. So it's changed a lot.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. No, I think that's it. The same thing applies to the internet. I'm going to talk to you about digital media now and see how the internet works, and or it used to work. Now, that was when we talk about radio, television, and print media, these are mainly what we mean by the traditional media, the old media. Now, if we move to the second category, which is what we call non-traditional or digital media, when we talk about digital media, we have to take into consideration two important discoveries which help to the development of digital media. These are one, the computer technology, two, the introduction of the internet. So when we talk about digital media, we mainly have to indicate that thanks to the computer technology and thanks to the internet, we all came to know about what we call the digital media. Of course, as you know, the computer, of course, when we talk about media and communication, the computer, we can take it as a kind of communication tool as well, a communication media. Computer was discovered, do you know when was it discovered for the first time? No idea? Okay. Computer was discovered for the first time in 1946. And the first, computer was huge. It was what we call the mainframe computer. And this mainframe computer was huge and was, instead of relying on what we call now these little things which we store our data on, okay? They used to have cartridge, huge things to store the data on them. That was the first, the mainframe computer. Usually when we talk about the computer, we talk about three important stages for the development of the computer. The first stage was the discovery or the introduction of what we call the mainframe computer. And it was huge and big and everything. Then the second stage was during the 70s when they start to discover what we call the personal computer or the PC. That marks the second stage of the development of the computer. And of course, when we talk about PC, of course, we have a screen, we have a computing unit, and we have a keyboard. That's what we mean by the PC. Then later on, during the mid 80s or early 90s, we start to see what we call the laptop. It's another version or another development in the computer industry. So therefore, when we talk about computer, we talk about three important stages: mainframe computer, PC computer, and then the laptop. And then by the turn of the 21st century, we start to see the tablet and iPad and many other things. And now we have it all in our iPhones, our mobile phones. We have everything now. So that shows you how the technology is progressing fast and fast. That was the first discovery which helped which helped the development of digital media. The second discovery was the introduction of the internet. Okay, do you know when the internet was introduced for the first time? Just try to give some kind of guess.
Yeah, we mentioned 1969.
Thank you very much, Jamal. It's an American, and that's why you know very well. Yes, the internet was discovered for the first time in 1969, and it was introduced in the Pentagon. And the internet, the first stage or the first use of the internet was mainly for military purposes. Of course, the internet was discovered, and the first ARPA, it was called ARPANET. Advanced research, etc. That ARPANET was the first ever internet, and it was in the Pentagon. You may ask me, why was it in the Pentagon? I'm going to tell you a short story about the introduction of the internet in the Pentagon, in the military institution in the States. During that time, during the 50s and the 80s, there were two kinds of camps. The Eastern camp, which was led by Soviet Union, and the other one, the Western, which was led by the American and the European. And there was some kind of what we call Cold War. In Cuba, there was some kind of revolution, a communist revolution. And Russians were supporting, or at the time it was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was supporting the Cuban, and they put some kind of missiles in Cuba to protect the military coup and the new communist system. Then the Americans were annoyed, and they were frightened that if they were attacked by some nuclear rockets by the Russians, how would they defend themselves? What about if the Russian attacks their data system or databases, which are important to use the nuclear rockets or nuclear weapons? What happened then? The Americans started to create different networks, so that if one network is hit by the Russian rockets, they can, launch their nuclear weapon from another location, from another network, from another database. And these different networks, they were connected to each other. And that's why the initial name of the internet was the interconnected networks. It's like a spider, few networks in Washington State, and some in Washington DC, in California, in Texas, and in every state they have some kind of network, and all these networks, they were connected to each other. So if one of them is hit, they can use the other one. That explains to you what we mean by the military use. So the initial introduction or the initial use of the internet was for military use. But then after that, it it was spread in different kinds. In France and Russia, in Japan, they were also using their own internet system. And then by late 70s or early 80s, we start to see another era or another stage related to the use of the internet. And that was the scientific use of the internet. And at this point of time, the internet was seen not only for military use, but also for scientific use. And the internet at this point of time was seen as a kind of encyclopedia. You go there and you search and you have a lot of data and information, etc. It was a kind of, huge database, huge encyclopedia. We go there and, use it for scientific purposes and get everything you need. That was the second stage of the internet use. So internet was used initially for military purposes, then secondly for scientific uses. It was seen as a kind of encyclopedia. Then during the early 1990s, we start to see a third stage or another use of the internet, and this was the commercial use of the internet. And during this era, we start to see two types of companies. One type of company called the internet access providers, and the other type called the internet service provider. The internet access providers is what we call IAPS. These companies were mainly interested in providing people with the connection to the internet. And of course, we had to pay money for that in the beginning, in the very beginning. You had to have a service and pay money for that. It was very expensive, and the service was not that, fast as we can see today. And then the other type of companies is what called the internet service provider, and that was a kind of companies which provides some kind of services on the internet. With the introduction of these two types of companies, we start to see the commercial use of the internet, and then the internet is not only used for military reasons or for scientific uses, but now they are becoming commercial, and they are becoming also a kind of a medium, important medium for service, for advertising, for promotion, for this and that. Also at the same time, during this era, or precisely by the turn of the 21st century, we could see what we call the interactivity. I mean, the internet was not anymore used only as a database, and it was not only used for emails and communication, but now we can see another use of the internet. It's what we call the interactive uses of the internet, and that marks the beginning of what we call today the social media. Of course, the social media, they started during the 80s and the 90s, but they were not as famous or as advanced as we could see them during the beginning of the 21st century. And of course, you all know that, Facebook was the first, social media, which was discovered 2004, right? And then we started Twitter and many other social media. And that's why, nowadays we are living in a kind of, I don't know how to call it. It's a kind of tsunami of social media. We have information coming from all over. We have information coming from north to south, south to north, west to east, and east to west. And that's why now we are really living in a kind of a dilemma. We are exposed, or the ordinary man, the man in the street, is exposed to a huge amount of information, and not all these information are accurate information. Some of them are rumors. Some of this information are concerned with hate speech. Some of them are just fake news. So with the introduction of these digital media, we start to see some kind of explosion of information, a lot of hate speech, a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and these digital media, they are becoming platforms full of this kind of rumors, hate speech, etc. That's really what we live at the moment. What can we do about this? Let me ask you a question. In this kind of environment, with this tsunami of information coming to us from here and there, from everywhere, and not all these information which you receive are accurate. I would say a lot of them are, related to humors, fake news, and then with the introduction of social media, we start to see what we call the citizen journalism. Everyone is becoming a media professional. Kids are becoming media professionals. They go online and they write something. So, and that's why it's becoming, like we have a kind of chaotic situation. Now, my question to you: what should we do? What do you think we should do about this dilemma which we live at the moment? What do you think that we can do? Okay, let me answer. What we do now, under the umbrella of some international organization, such as UNESCO and many other civil society associations, we start to promote what we call media and information literacy. We start to talk about what we call media education. We start to talk about we have to teach people on how to use the media, and we have to teach people on how to examine the information which they receive from the media. Therefore, now we are confronted with two important and very important concepts. The first one is what we call media education, and the second one is what we call media and information literacy. And to make to make life easy for you, media education is just a mechanism, and this mechanism or this method we use in order to make people media literate and information literate. That's why we say media and information literacy is the outcome of media education. And now I think before I move to any other thing, I would like to hear from you in case you have any comments or any questions. So now the trend, what we talk about now, we talk about how to teach people in general and young people in particular how to use the media, how to be a critical thinker when they deal with the media content, how to empower people in general and young people and children in particular, so that they would be in a position to deal with the media and deal with the information. How it's briefly what we are interested in here when we talk about media education and the outcome of media literacy. We are trying to ask people to acquire some skills which would help them to deal with the media in a healthy manner, so they won't be affected by hate speech, and they won't be affected by fake news, misinformation, or disinformation. At the same time, they will be critical thinker. They take whatever they receive from the media, from a critical viewpoint. They don't take the content for granted, but they examine it and analyze it, and etc. Now I think that's all what I would like to say to you this time. And now I think we're having a few minutes. I would like to open the floor for any comments or any questions, in case you have any. Now, Maya, yes, go ahead, please.
I actually had a question about this, particularly in places that have a lot of representation from different countries. For example, at my school, we have over 48 countries represented in our student body.
Yes.
So my question is if we're trying to teach critical thinking and what's fake news, you're working with so many different perspectives
Mhm.
and education levels and language even. Like I'm a little hesitant to figure out where to start with some of this, because an education curriculum that I might say, oh, this would be good in the US might be, considered, oh, that's the wrong approach by a different country or different perspectives. So I'm kind of curious what people think about that, because to me that's a very daunting um, piece of trying to come up with some kind of curriculum for this.
Yeah, I think poor you. It's a it's a very hectic situation to deal with, some kind of 40 cultures.
Mm-hmm,
Nowadays we talk about what we call intercultural dialogue, right?
mm-hmm,
At the same time, we have what we call negative stereotypes about each other. I
mm-hmm,
mean, yeah, we
mm-hmm,
always, we were brought up through whatever history or media or whatever to,
mm-hmm,
so every one of us has a certain stereotype about the other. What we can do at the moment, or what we try to do through our work, globally, we
mm-hmm,
try to, to teach people how to respect the other.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. And also we have to teach people, right, not
mm-hmm,
to take the stereotypes about each other as a catalyst, as a the final thing, but let us
mm-hmm,
know and mix and know each other, and at the same time we have to respect each other. So
mm-hmm,
the keywords here are respect the other.
mm-hmm.
I know
So
it's not
then
easy. It's not easy, but usually
mhm.
we have at school. I don't know if you have this kind of extracurricular periods or classes. You have these in your school?
Um, there is kind of like a social wellness class that I know we had last year. I haven't heard whether or not it was continued this year, but it was supposed to be teaching you how to be a good citizen, is kind of how they explained
Yes.
it to me. Um, but I'm not sure if it's continued. I really hope it is.
We had with UNESCO, we had a very good experience in which we applied. I was the lead consultant in this project. We applied it in Jordan, in Amman.
Mm,
We took some schools, right?
mhm,
And in these experimental schools, we introduced a program called media education. So usually they used to have one extracurricular class once a
mhm,
week, 45 minutes a
mhm,
week, and there used to be something like theater, cooking, etc. Then the strategy was based on adding another extracurricular class, and
mhm,
this class would be related to media education.
mm,
So
okay.
we the core here was to teach these young students, the young children, how to deal with the media, and how the media function, and not everything is the media is correct. You have to be very
Mhm,
careful. You have to rely on different sources. You have to make sure
mhm,
that you are getting the right information and from the right source. That's why you
mhm,
have to have a kind of diverse sources of information,
mhm.
right? So I think the
Yes.
best option, according to my experience, is to have some kind of extracurricular class where you can teach children something about media. When you teach them about media, you try to
Mhm,
teach them, or they may acquire some kind of skills such as critical thinking, searching
mhm,
for information, double checking the information, analyzing the information. All
mhm,
these are considered to be some kind of skills which everyone, not only young people or children, everyone must acquire these skills.
mhm.
Right?
Yeah. I really liked your respect uh part of
I
this,
hope
because
I hope
just
you.
because
If you need any further, I can help you in this. If you can persuade your school to, to
hmm
introduce
hmm
something like that.
yes, I think eventually that is something I'd like to pursue, just because if we teach the media literacy aspect of this, I worry that they're going to say, oh, well, that's because it's a such and such source, that stereotype of, oh, it's from this place or from this perspective, therefore it's wrong. In the US right now, that is extremely prevalent politically. So to me, the respect piece of that seems to be kind of like the building block to build the media literacy from first, just to kind of even the playing field almost.
During the last Global Economic Forum in Davos, that was in January, I think, they issued a very important report. It's called high risk report. And it was, a kind of a work or a kind of survey or a study which was carried out on a 1,400 experts who were attending this forum. And the finding of this report or the finding of this study, it shows that the most serious problem which we are facing nowadays is what we call misinformation and disinformation, right? And also it was agreed that one of the best mechanisms to counter these misinformation or disinformation is media education. It was also indicated in last year's General Assembly meeting in New York that it was recommended by the Secretary General of the United Nations that he urged all member states to introduce or to use media education in order to counter not only misinformation or disinformation, but in order to counter terrorism and extremism. Right? So one approach around it, Maya, because it's interesting what you're saying. What happened in Jordan? We started by, it was a 1-year program, or it was the whole thing was for 1 year before we introduced these extracurricular periods or classes. We started by creating what we call media clubs at schools, and then I had to select some experimental schools, and I had to take some teachers from the school and give them, a proper training for a week on media education. And then they went back to schools and they started to create what we call at the time media clubs, right? And the whole thing started like that, by simple things, and then usually little things grow bigger and bigger by the time.
I love that. Thank you.
Okay. One day you'll do it, I'm sure you will.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
No, I just wanted to say that,
Yeah.
sorry, Malak, but
No,
referring to
it's-
Maya's question, I just wanted to say that this model particularly and all the following models, the basis of that model is to how to develop the critical thinking, how to develop media literacy experiences for applied to the education and to school. So hopefully you will find one answer in this model and the following models.
Okay, that's good. Good news.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, Malak. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Yes. So
Yeah. I wanted to ask, does this really work, the media education? Does it really work? Because from my experience, these tools like the Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, they are used, right? It's not like a conspiracy theory, but they are used for the agenda settings of the societies. Like they make the societies more shallow. Even politically today, like in my country, we fight sectarian political fights, war.
Lebanon.
Yeah, Lebanon. So in the Middle East, you can see like Syria, in Egypt, we all fight we have this internal war and we have the external war. So, and the basic tool today is the social media, because really people are really illiterate and they just spread hate everywhere. But I think it's also it was there for a reason. These applications are there for a reason. Even now, the USA elections, and even when Hillary Clinton and Trump, they used Twitter. We saw how the fake news on Twitter. Yeah. So does it really work to make people literate about media? Does it work in the societies from your experience? Like you said, you had this in Jordan, and now I can see Jordan. يعني it's
You know, I think,
somehow yeah.
now we can say that we are mainly rely on social media for news. We don't look at newspaper or magazine anymore. Even most of news organization, they created their own website and their own for their newspaper, magazine, etc. So I think it's becoming kind of you know uh, controlling. Everything is controlled by now. The problem here, if I may say, is that our young people, when they have access to the social media, when they have mobile phone, especially in the Middle East, because kids in the Middle East are a bit spoiled. A child of 2 or 3 years old, he can be, he can have a mobile phone, a smartphone, etc. I think the problem here is that these people, they live in virtual worlds, right? And for
Yeah.
example, who would be interested nowadays, in sitting with the family on the same table and having dinner or lunch? No, in our families, we cannot find that nowadays. Everyone has his own wallet. He will take, we call it meals by plates. Everyone, he takes his dish and his plate and he goes to his room in order to stay in touch and keep in his own virtual world. And that's a big dilemma. It's a big problem. We have to do something about it. Plus, some like autism, is becoming very common
Yeah.
nowadays. Now, these people, they stick to the media, they live in the virtual world, they concentrate there, and we call them social media, but I would say that they are anti-social media because they split the families and they lead to the creation of some diseases such as autism, etc. Of course, we have the good aspects of media. We have also the good advantage of media because they facilitate our life. We can travel by using the mobile phone. We pay with the bank, and we can have all kind of service through the technology. But at the same time, it's a problem, right? So I think we have to be very careful in dealing with this. And I think the most of the educational systems, I think they are somehow far away from these negative effects because in curricula in most countries, the curricula are like taboos, especially in the Middle East. No minister of education would like anybody to touch these taboos, So when you talk about introducing something new, they are a little bit frightened and they are not very enthusiastic to have it. Yeah, it's a big problem anyway. Let us, let us see what will happen next. I remember, let me really give you a good experience to show you how the new media are good and useful. When I was doing my graduate studies, either in Paris or in England, my family used to call me by going to the central, and they used to book a telephone landline because at that time there was no widely spread mobile phones. They used to go and pay some money and call me for 3 minutes, and it was very good every month because it was expensive. But nowadays, look, we move all over the world. We have mobile. We talk to our families. So even we don't pay any money. We just use the internet service and the Wi-Fi, and we got it. So I mean, somehow these social media or these digital media, they have a lot of advantages. They offer for us a lot of facilities and everything. But at the same time, they have also, on the other hand, we can see that if you are becoming a kind of addict for the use of these, it's dangerous, because you will be living in a virtual world. Right? Anyway, I think I don't want to keep you any longer because I was instructed by Albert not to exceed 1 hour.
No, it's okay. I think it's positive whenever we have some questions because it means there's a lot an interest for the class. But I don't know if anyone else want to say something or want to ask something or add something.
I would like to actually, if it's
Yeah.
possible, really quickly. I think for me, there's a sensationalism of media today, and there's this idea of the mainstream media being the ones who are the trusted ones, but a lot of times now in mainstream media, they're also feeding off of the fake media that's coming from the social media. And then sometimes they have to re-step and re-correct themselves. So that kind of gives like a even playing field to fake news and then the mainstream media. So I guess when you ask like the uh, how to uh, how to implement these teachings of media literacy, like who are the guardians of that? Like who are the people that we're supposed to look to give us factual information, especially with the devices that we use today?
Right, yeah, I agree with you.
That's a hard question, Samy.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's, you know, it's but again, you know, we are, you know, let us say that, you know, these digital media are becoming platform full of fake news and this. But you know, Jamal, we said that, you know, according to the, you know, according to scholars, according to research, we have to empower people. We have people must acquire some skills when they deal with media. Yeah, they cannot deal with media blindly, but they have to have some kind of skills which would help them, would empower them, would protect them from any negative effects of media. Yeah. Anyway, that was fine. I think I'm happy with the discussion, and but I don't
Yeah,
want to do anymore. So if you don't have any further comments or question, I'll give it over to Albert. Please, Albert, floor is yours.
no, just I will repeat again, and I mean, this is really interesting, and that's a really difficult topic. What we are talking today, critical thinking, media literacy, basically, and we will go deeply, more deeply in the following models because we are just starting. So we are happy to welcome back, welcome you back to this course, and we will see you at the end of the month. I don't know if anyone has any question related to the virtual campus functioning or something, especially you, Jamal. I don't know if you had the opportunity to check out all the documents and something.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to check out the documents and start to dive into the first module, kind of doing 1 and 2 at the same time. And I guess I
Yeah,
can touch base with you to see about the assignment and all the reading, how that would work in terms of completing that, and
yeah.
what the benchmarks would be for me, just so I can stay on brand with everyone else, but also kind of play catch up at the same time.
Yeah, I would recommend you to just follow the normal course and take your time to complete the first activity because it's okay. We have just started, so it doesn't matter if you take 1, 2 extra weeks to complete the first assignment, so it's okay. But yes, just to keep the normal rhythm of the course to not lose the track, right?
Okay.
So anything else? We have the WhatsApp chat group. We have the mail that it's available almost 24 hours. So if you need anything else, you can write us. And again, we will see you at the end of the month. And as you know, you will have this virtual session tomorrow on the virtual council. So you want to check out this again. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Samy,
Thank you.
and have a nice afternoon or
Thank you.
morning,
See you
depending on
Thank
soon.
you.
the time. Bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye.